Hi, I'm Paul Rabil, and you are watching The American Athlete.
Atlas with the ball. And Paul Rabil snuck it in!
Paul Rabil, co-founder and chief strategy officer of the Premier Lacrosse League. I also play in it with Atlas Lacrosse Club. I started playing lacrosse when I was 12 years old. Prior to that, I was playing soccer, baseball, football. I swam, played basketball. My neighbor gave me his stick, said, hey, why don't you try this new sport called lacrosse? So I was introduced to it. I was terrible at it, but there was something about the game that gravitated me more and more toward it. And it was an amalgamation of the contact that I would get in football, the endurance of soccer, the agility and skill of basketball, kind of all baked into one. And from there, I started getting better, and by the time I was a junior in high school, I committed to just playing lacrosse year-round. Mike and I, going back to our adolescent sports career together, it was short-lived because we would fight almost every time out in the backyard, just hyper-competitive, and there's some element of familial pride. You just always want to beat your brother. So we learned pretty quickly we had to distance ourselves in sport. And still to this day, we'll have a mandate if we're playing a pickup basketball game that Mike and I have to play on the same team. So there's some like objectivity to knowing, okay, he's my business partner now. Is it worth going into like this emotional, really nominal, competitive fight over something that doesn't matter? But then as we matured, we incorporated the value of communication. So being able to make sure you're doing as many weekly or daily check-ins communicatively and not taking advantage of that safe harbored relationship is something that we practice regularly. And then the flip side is if you do mix business with family, you have this level of innate trust that is incredibly advantageous to building something that is highly risky, challenging, and ambitious. You know you can fall back on someone to bring comfort and security that you didn't have or potentially would have trouble accessing with someone that you don't have that bloodline trust with. So lacrosse is a stickball sport. It's full contact, endurance, a lot of agility, a lot of skill. The winning team scores more goals than the losing team. Fans to new sports gravitate in three ways. First, best in class, right? So if you know you're gonna watch the best ping pong players square off, like, I'm gonna tune in and watch it. These are the best in the world. Second is some type of national pride or national association. And that would be the Olympics, right? You watch Team USA. And the third is your collegiate affinity if you are an alumni of an institution. You know, I'll watch Johns Hopkins swimming compete or Johns Hopkins fencing because it's my alma mater and I care a lot about them.
After a long road of growing up in the sports, teaming up with his brother Mike, and doing a never-ending amount of research, the first weekend of the Premier Lacrosse League had arrived, and Paul knew just how much was on the line.
I had always been kind of an entrepreneur and athlete, but this was to a whole nother level. There were a lot of unknowns. Part of the uses of our capital that Mike and I have raised was to have a kick-ass operational team because that's going to make the player and fan experience the best. And the second was creating a media team internally that could, in tandem with NBC, tell their stories at a level that no other sports league has done. And we know social media better than any other sports league. Week one in Boston, it was like, okay, this is it now. We have our officials here, we have our coaches, we have these team identities, they're all gelling from training camp. Fans are on site, and these are fans that pay. It was nerve-wracking. Our first two games went to overtime. The crowd was into it, and we had people like Bill Belichick in attendance, and Teddy Bruschi, and Angelo Ruggiero, and Matt Hasselback, and there were local sports celebrities there. So if you look at a traditional broadcast in sports, it's usually 4 to 5 cameras. So we negotiated in our deal with NBC is 10 to 12. So we've lowered our game cams, which is essentially your 50-yard line camera. Brought slasher cameras from angles. We have a sky cam. We mic up our players and we talk to them from the broadcast with our talent in booth. So we're doing things that no league has ever done before. To see the physicality of a player that's getting hit as they're cradling, pushed in the air, throwing 2 fakes while they're in the air, and either wrapping around the goalie or throwing a backhand shot around the goalie. That skill we've found has been more received than ever before for our sport and has added to a broader fan base because it's like, wow, these guys are exceptional athletes in what they're doing. I didn't realize it was that difficult because I couldn't see from this wide angle. But what I like and what I do as a midfielder, and a lot of our midfielders do, is you take this breakdown sequence when the ball's in my stick and I'm dodging a defender. It's like a receiver running a route on a quarterback. And I got to get my hands free so I can shoot essentially with the same velocity and pace of a slap shot of Alex Ovechkin in the NHL on a goalie with this really dense rubber ball that doesn't really wear much protection. And they're standing inside this 6x6 cage. People think our goalies are nuts. And so the dynamic of you have these brute force players, 225 pounds, shooting a 100-mile-an-hour shot with this dense rubber ball inside of 12 yards, and this goalie standing between the pipes and saving it with his hands is, I think, unlike any other sport. Our sport is already large. We have International Olympic Committee provisional recognition. That came in 2018. So the sport's on the fast track to being an Olympic sport. For us, like, the biggest bet we made was if we could roll out a red carpet for the best players in the world. So we quadrupled wages. We're also the first team sport to give our athletes stock options in the business because we see the future trend of athletes as influencers in sports and taking ownership and then giving them full-time health care. And that bet that we're gonna make is that our audience is going to love them more and we're gonna get a better product on field as a result. And that was a big bet. We raised venture capital money and we took on an incumbent in a very competitive, broader sports professional landscape. It's more difficult to maintain success than it is to achieve it. So we're gonna figure out how we can keep pushing and growing this league.
Paul Rabil, the hat trick.